All righty. The first question.
Each one of you give me your backgrounds, please.
All right, I'll start with myself. I'm a software developer and the owner of a guitar store. So I'm not sure how that happened, but it did. I'm still a freelance software developer, so that kind of, I guess, ties into how I found out about Bitcoin that early. Although the truth is, at that point, I was looking into banking because the system was so screwed up, I had to figure out how it worked. And that's how I found out about Bitcoin. Oh.
I was education, too.
Education? Well, yeah, so I have a degree in computer science.
Oh, thanks, Zach. So I'm at Whitlock. I also have a degree, not in computer science, in computer software engineering from the University of Florida. I got involved in the Liberty movement down there. I was actually the organizer for the Ron Paul meetup group in Gainesville, Florida. And I met a couple of other people in that, well, I met a lot of people in that group, but I met Neil and Mike and a couple others who convinced me to come to Liberty Forum in New Hampshire in 2008. And I discovered the Free State Project there. And it pretty much made up my mind that I was going to move to New Hampshire, and I finally did in 2010, and that's where I live now. It's the best decision I've ever made in my life.
I'm an entrepreneur, I guess. Originally from LA, I started a company out there, and then I moved to London, and I'm working on 2 startups and studying over there. So one's the Bitcoin startup, and one's another one. So yeah, that's my background.
Well, you know me, but I have a degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech. I've been working in technical sales and marketing for the last 16 years, and I learned about Bitcoin from one of the buddies that I went to college with, who is a computer science major.
I'm Zach. I have my degree in political science and media. I've had, I guess, 2 guitar stores over the past 7 years, so it's retail mostly. And now I just started my own marketing and design business and got through Bitcoin, well, through learning all about the free market in retail, and that's most of it. And my brother Josh, of course.
I'm Alan Reiner. I'm the author of the Armory Bitcoin client. I don't know how many of you have heard of that. I come from a background, I have an undergrad and graduate degree in math, so if anyone has any questions relating to the math of Bitcoin, I am a mathematician, and I'd like to think one of my strengths is explaining math in ways that aren't too complicated for others to understand. But I got into Bitcoin because I'm also a software engineer. I do a lot of things, apparently. I'm also a software engineer, and I saw a lot of kind of gaps in the way that Bitcoin was being used, and certain technologies or certain aspects of the technology that people weren't able to use, and that's what I wanted to change.
All right. Can you guys hear me? All right. You can't see me, but you can hear me. All right. One question that we had was submitted by a gentleman named Steve Sheets, and his question was, my main issue with Bitcoin is that it could be corrupted just like the fiat currency that is passed off as money by the U.S. government. What is to prevent this from occurring?
All right, I'll take a shot at that question. I think that Bitcoin has a lot of value in this case. That, you know, a lot of people talk about Satoshi Nakamoto and the mysterious creator of Bitcoin, and without focusing too much on him, the fact that this guy disappeared, that he created this and disappeared, was kind of a testament to Bitcoin is owned by everyone. There is no owner of it. There is no one person that controls it, or even one particular entity that controls it. And I think that gives it some freedom from the typical mechanisms of how these things get corrupted. The fact that it can exist entirely without any intervention of large corporations or large entities or governments is something that gives it a purity that will actually allow it to survive and actually sustain without that intervention and without that corruption. So that's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, I'd like to think of Bitcoin as more of a social protocol. You know, it's a social money. You know, it only has value because the individual people themselves want to use it. And it kind of raises an interesting question in terms of a social experiment. And the question is this: can all the individual users of the money, those businesses that use it, those people that use it for spending, those people who use it for saving, can they collectively manage a money supply? Or do we need one guy with his finger on a printing press telling us how much money that we need? So Bitcoin is controlled by the users, and there are constant enhancements to the software. But if somebody wants to roll out an enhancement that nobody likes, nobody will upgrade to that version, and then it won't be adopted. So it's pure democratic money. People can determine what version of the software they are running, and if the majority of the people are running that version, then that's the one that sticks. So it really is money as a social protocol, and it's controlled by the people who use it. And if something better comes along, then people could migrate to that. But it would be, again, a value transfer like we talked about earlier, not necessarily somebody forcing a change on you.
Someone once said, when talking about software development on the Bitcoin protocol itself, they said, developing for Bitcoin is like trying to change the engine on a car while it's running 100 miles per hour. This is because, yeah, as we've all said, you know, it's if you try to change the protocol and people don't want the changes, they'll reject you. And that's why we haven't had a lot of protocol upgrades so far, just because it's very hard to upgrade the protocol. You have to make a case for every single change, and if you know every change isn't really good, we're just not going to upgrade.
I guess we're ready for the next question.
Another question. Oh, go ahead.
Three
No,
answers
please.
is
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah, I had a question. During your presentation, there was a slide featured that depicted the adoption phase of a new technology, and on that chart, there was the chasm that you described. I'm just curious, what to each of you, what does the chasm look like to you, and how can we here today help bridge that gap? Because I'm very interested in bridging that gap and getting to where everyone is using Bitcoin as a regular thing. So what does it look like to you? How can we help bridge that gap?
Okay. Well, I can answer it briefly, but I think some other people may want to say it too. I think you don't want to try to jump across it too soon, because you don't want people's first experience with Bitcoin to be a negative one and then they don't come back to it. So you want to make sure that the technology is ready from a securities perspective, number one. Number two, you really want to get the exchange rate at least not so volatile, or have it hidden to the point where people don't even realize it. The international business person that we talked about, I'm doing a deal here where I want to send 10,000 euros to Germany. Honestly, it does not matter what the price of Bitcoin is. The price does not matter, because I'm going to buy however many Bitcoins it costs me. I'm going to have them for a millisecond. I'm going to send them. The guy who receives them, he's going to sell them a millisecond later. Doesn't matter if the price of Bitcoin is $1 and we buy 10,000 of them, or they're $10,000 and we only buy one. So once you can get the software to the point where the holding time and the volatility is minimal, then I think you'll start to see major CEOs start to adopt this. And when major CEOs start to adopt this, I think it will progress into the main consumer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just a short answer. I think from an adoption point of view for Bitcoin, I think it's kind of more of something that if you're excited about it and you know bars in your area or small businesses that you really like and you get excited about it and talk to them and they start accepting it and more people do that, I think that's really helps, and it really helps show people that, oh, there's this other coin kind of that's peer-to-peer that's more of a community thing, and it's really fun to use. And there are all kinds of fun stories with Bitcoin, like the pizzas that were sold for 10,000 Bitcoin what was it, a year and a half or 2 years ago, and people are like, what? That doesn't make sense. People bought two Bitcoins for two pizzas for $150,000, and they get excited about it. So I think spreading the word and helping Bitcoin go a little viral, if you're excited about it, is definitely a cool thing to do. But it doesn't necessarily, it's not at a stage necessarily that it really is going to help your local neighborhood bar succeed at this point.
Tony was talking about these international CEOs, but another market that I'm looking at is just average consumers, average everyday people, and what they need is something that they can feel secure with and that's easy to use, and they don't have to worry about downloading software, securing their operating system, figuring out the blockchain, waiting for everything to happen. So, from my point of view, something that would help get over that chasm would be little devices that people can hold in their hand and feel secure and do convenient payments just like they're doing now. So we talked a little bit about Bitcoin cards. You just have something that looks just like a credit card, but maybe it's a little more high tech. So instead of having to swipe it, you just touch it to the counter when you want to pay. Boom, you've just done a transaction. If you're worried about securing your life savings in Bitcoin, you might have a little device that you plug into your wall. You don't care what it does. You just plug it into your wall. You know it's secure, you know that your private keys are secure on that, and somebody will actually have to physically go into your house, steal it, and maybe know a password, or maybe you'll put it in a safe. But people know how to secure their own personal belongings a lot better than getting into all this high-tech stuff. So I think we're going to start seeing devices like that will really turn this into something that everybody can intuitively understand and start using, and that's where it can start hitting the mainstream.
I'd like to draw a parallel regarding the chasm. So being a young male computer geek myself, I was using text messaging long before most people knew what it was. And I can tell you at the time, it was not seen as cool at all. It was a thing for geeks, and you paid like 25 cents per text message, and it wasn't very user-friendly. But that clearly has changed. Everyone knows what a text message now is. All the pop stars use them. You text to American Idol to vote for the people. So clearly that went mainstream. And I think Bitcoin will follow the same trend. Right now, it's something that only the geeks use and no one else knows about. But at some point in the future, it's going to follow the same path that text messaging did. And everyone will know what it is. Everyone will use it. And it won't be seen as any niche thing anymore.
Next question.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about Bitcoin accounts that you could have with a third party, or I guess it would be a second party since Bitcoin isn't a party exactly. But is there anybody offering like private insurance on account, kind of like what the FDIC does, but you would buy it from another party, that if the account got hacked and money went away, you were insured to a certain amount, or do you foresee that happening?
So currently, does anyone? No. Currently, no. I truly hope. So what he's saying is, are the FDIC, Federal Insurance of Money, and goes on in a lot of countries in the European Union, etc. Money gets insured. So if you lose your money, they'll insure it. They'll give your money back. This is, to some, perceived as a problem with Bitcoin because there is no insurance. So if you accidentally send out your money to someone who's the wrong person, you've lost it. If it gets hacked, you've lost it. There's no central control, which means there's no central person to go to when everything screws up. I see that this could happen in terms of central nodes. That could become a thing, but I see more in terms of there will be more escrow. So you send your Bitcoin to an escrow party, and then it eventually gets negotiated with someone else. I don't think insurance of money would happen as such. Anyone?
But if it was a private online bank account storing your Bitcoins,
Yeah.
see another private entity say, if you give us X amount, we'll insure what's in there. If it's hacked, we'll replace it.
Yeah. Do you know who Fred Wilson is from Union Square Ventures? So he posted an idea for a Bitcoin business, and he said it would be really nice to have a Bitcoin bank. And one of the main reasons is that people could sleep at night knowing their Bitcoins were secure. Very simple concept. To date, nobody has built something, but the business plan is certainly out there, and the idea is certainly out there for anybody that wants to pick it up and do it.
There have been hacks of accounts, and at certain points, those exchanges that have been hacked will not Bitcoin accounts. Bitcoin's accounts have never been hacked, but accounts of exchanges, so the central nodes, have been hacked, and those have sometimes been able to pay back the Bitcoins even though they were hacked at their loss. But other than that, no.
One other point here is that having a Bitcoin bank or having a Bitcoin account is very different than having a dollar account or a gold account. So if you're not a computer geek, it might seem daunting to secure it. But if you really know what you're doing, it's a lot easier to secure something like that than to secure some gold vault. You never know how somebody's going to break in. If you really know what you're doing with a Bitcoin account, you can keep it, offline. There's just no way somebody will come in and hack it if it's not even on the internet. So what that means is two things. A, maybe you don't even need insurance if it's properly done, but maybe the insurance will be very cheap because the insuring company can come in and audit your systems and say, hey, there's not that much of a risk here. I have all this capital that I have just in case, but the risk of this happening is tiny because I've gotten my security experts out there and they're just like, they can't figure out any way this would possibly happen. So it might be like insuring a bank account really isn't economical. That's why governments do it at a loss. But maybe a Bitcoin account could be secured better. And maybe individual people wouldn't even need that because the security would be so good for them they wouldn't need that to pay those extra fees to guard against it.
One thing that you should mention is whereas with gold and paper money, it's possible for a thief to come into a bank vault or into your home and steal it. It's not really the case with Bitcoin. If you keep your wallet on your computer encrypted, someone could come into your house and steal your computer and they wouldn't be able to spin your Bitcoin. So they didn't really steal your Bitcoin. All they stole were your private keys that are encrypted, so they can't use them without your password. And they wouldn't know that. Hopefully you haven't written it down right on your computer desk. And also, you can create a backup of your Bitcoin wallet, and you can store it on a free web host that's on the other side of the country. So if you do get your computer stolen, you can just retrieve your backup. And so you can't do that with a bank account. You can't make a copy of your gold or your dollars, but you can make a copy of your keys that allow you to spend the Bitcoin that is in the addresses that you control. So it's possible that you wouldn't need insurance at all because it's possible that if you manage your wallet properly, you can't have your Bitcoin stolen from you.
Got it, Andrew?
So I have a small business and I'm ready to get my feet wet with this because any alternative to Federal Reserve notes is a good one. So like right now I use we sell on our website and at events, and so online I use PayPal, which I hate using and I hate dealing with, but it's the most cost effective. And we use Square when we're at events. So would BitPay work like PayPal? Would it integrate right into our website? And what about for doing like on-site transactions?
Yeah, we can do both, and it's going to be the best merchant service you ever use. It's better than Square, and it's better than PayPal, so come talk to me.
We have thank you. We have an online question, and the question is, what's up with the BitInstant MasterCard thing?
Yes, question.
What's up with that thing?
Unfortunately, BitInstant isn't here today. But the answer is, I don't know. Apparently, MasterCard and the banks involved aren't as visionary as some of us would hope. And obviously, you need the cooperation of those companies in order to get something like that through. On the other hand, there are other companies like Bitcoin Central in France, and they've reported that they have, full agreements with their regulators, and they're hooking into the entire French banking system, and they're saying they're going to put out European debit cards. So, maybe that'll happen the next few months. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Anybody have anything to add? All right.
One more question. This is probably directed to either Alan or Matt. I was wondering if you could talk about the scripting language and what other things you can do with Bitcoin, like, transactions signed by multiple people, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's an excellent question for the mathematician here. Me having written Armory, client, which is a program that that handles these Bitcoin transactions and has to get into scripting. I have a lot of experience with how the scripting language works. And I'm sorry, I forgot the name. As Matt explained earlier, there is a very rich functionality that exists kind of under the hood that most people currently using Bitcoin are not aware of. And it's simply that when we do person-to-person transactions, what you're really doing is you're writing a script, a very simple script that says, I want to pay someone. And but this scripting language is so much richer than that. It can do so much more than that. And one of the things it can say is you have multiple people with multiple accounts or private keys, and you can say, I want to require 2 out of the 3 of these people to sign this transaction. And what that does is for instance, you could have a board of directors. Say there was 3 directors of a company, and all the money is kept in an account that uses these types of scripts. And what it means is that as long as any 2 of those 3 directors is willing to provide their signature, then that money can be transferred for whatever purpose they see fit. That's just the most basic form of what they call multi-signature transactions. If you ever heard the acronym P2SH, it's pay to script hash. It's basically what the network can use for people to create arbitrary contracts between one another. And essentially what it does is it uses the Bitcoin network itself as escrow. And whereas normally you would need 2 people purchasing a house, you have a third party that is holding the money, and there's conditions for when that money is released and how it, where does it go, at what time, how is it distributed. In this case, this is where Bitcoin really shines in its flexibility, is that the scripting language allows you to have the network do that for you. Obviously, there's advantages to having actual third parties in the loop and that they can arbitrate. But there's also a lot of value in the fact that we can tell the Bitcoin network how we want these complex transactions to play out. And when things go smoothly, you didn't need to pay any of those middlemen who were really not, all they were doing was holding your money. But the value that they added was perhaps not what you paid for.
There's another interesting kind of transaction you can do with these scripts, which we've been calling the dead man switch. And this ties into what we were talking about before of losing your money. So there are 2 kinds of problems that you have when you're storing your own money. One of them is somebody could come and steal it. The other one is you could lose the key to your safe, which is even worse in Bitcoin land, because if you lose your key to Bitcoin, you can't just hire somebody to break into your vault. It's impossible. So you lose your money. With the dead man switch, what happens is there's a time lock. And let's say you set the time lock at 6 months. After 6 months of no activity, where you haven't done anything on the Bitcoin network, all of that money will automatically be transferred to a different account. Let's say account held by 2 of your next of kin. That means that even if you lost your key and you thought you lost all your money, all you have to do is wait 6 months and it's going to be automatically transferred back to somebody else who can retrieve it. And that's great for all kinds of reasons. It's great especially because there's a trade-off between guarding against theft and guarding against loss. Right? If you're guarding against loss, you're going to want to make a lot of backups. If you're guarding against theft, you don't want to have too many backups because then it's easier to find one of them. So if you can have this dead man switch protecting you against loss, you can go more hardcore on the anti-theft precautions. That strengthens the whole thing, and there are all kinds of applications for something like that. But that's just another example of the really cool things you can start doing with scripts, and these things are just coming online now. Anybody else have anything?
If not, we have another question.
All right, go for it.
A lot of you spoke about how it's international, it can go across borders, and there's no real way to stop it from doing that. But what happens if a country decides that they don't like Bitcoin and they want to crack down on it, or something happens and it's outlawed or it's illegal or something like that? I know Mark spoke about how even though there were no exchanges, it still happened. But what about for businesses? They can't risk getting shut down because they want to accept Bitcoin. Or do you not even see that happening?
So far, no country's ever outlawed Bitcoin. And I think the precedent set by these European countries and the United Kingdom, hopefully Finland, I mean, that's just awesome. Hopefully that'll set somewhat of a precedent for a decision from, say, the US or something. But yeah, all I would say is so far no one's ever outlawed Bitcoin. If it did happen, I think, yeah, a lot of business, well, Tony should answer it. If it did happen, I think Tony would be better prepared because his business is dependent on the legal status. So I'll defer the rest of my answer to Tony.
Thanks, Mark. I think what you're going to see is different jurisdictions are going to make different decisions, and probably the best analogy that I could give you is the gambling industry. There are some states where lotteries are illegal. There are some states where casinos are illegal. But then you have some jurisdictions that look at it and say, it's okay, we're going to come up with some common sense rules and regulations, and businesses, bring your jobs here, bring your innovation here. Look at what that's done for Las Vegas. Look at what that's done for Gibraltar, Macau. So it doesn't take many of these little pockets of jurisdictions to embrace Bitcoin and say, it's regulated here, here's some common sense rules, but businesses, bring your jobs and bring your innovation here. So maybe it's Finland, maybe it's Costa Rica, maybe it's Singapore. You only need a few pockets around the world to really make it worthwhile. And because Bitcoin is on the internet, it can reach anywhere. So we can all run our businesses from anywhere as long as we can access the internet, just like sending an email, right? You can send an email to somebody across the room just as easily as you can send an email to somebody in China. So the fact that some jurisdictions may clamp down on it, I think it would be to their detriment because all the jobs and innovation is just going to go elsewhere.
I'll just add something, kind of a side note. The topic of actually making Bitcoin illegal is an interesting topic in itself. Not to speak to what would happen if it was made illegal, but more about how difficult it would be to make it illegal. That Bitcoin itself is really just a protocol. It's a set of mathematical equations, and the whole process of that is something that legislators would find very difficult. Not to say that they couldn't find a way to do it, but they can't outlaw Bitcoin by name because its name is really arbitrary. They can try to outlaw certain types of transfers over the internet, but what they're going to find is that they're going to make a lot of things that they thought that they still believe are legitimate. They're going to make those illegal. It's very difficult for them to make this one piece of the internet illegal without the fallout of all these other things that they actually had no intention of criminalizing.
Just to add one thing. I think first of all, from a consumer point of view, when you look at how much the government wanted and still want to close down BitTorrent and have been unsuccessful at that in a lot of ways, that's similar to Bitcoin. As long as you have a lot of consumers that are the users and have to worry about it being legal a bit less, if they keep on using that throughout the world, then some of the small businesses still have that incentive to accept it on a certain level because someone can just say, well, I can buy it from this other store with Bitcoin if you don't want to accept it, and they may bend the rules a bit.
There have already been some examples of politicians accepting campaign contributions in Bitcoin. In New Hampshire, State Rep Mark Warden received over $1,000 worth of Bitcoin in just a few hours when he put it up there, and some of them were from other countries, so he had to give them back. But and that's continued. More politicians have started accepting Bitcoins. I think if you see that on kind of a broad scale of politicians accepting a lot of money in Bitcoins, they're not going to be so quick to outlaw Bitcoin acceptance.
Yeah, he did win re-election. He represents me, and I'm very happy to have him as my rep. In fact, on the subject of politicians accepting campaign contributions in Bitcoin, I know that one of the original founders of DreamHost, which is one of the largest shared web hosting providers on the internet, They're just an absolutely massive company. One of the original founders has created a tool for politicians to accept campaign contributions in Bitcoin, and he doesn't charge a fee for it. It's only for politics right now. He also wrote a bot to allow people to take advantage of dollar cost averaging to invest in Bitcoin. So they can put their dollars in, and then this program will automatically buy a fixed amount of Bitcoin every so often, so that they hopefully average out to a pretty good price on it. So he doesn't work for DreamHost anymore. Unfortunately, I still can't pay my DreamHost bill in Bitcoins, but I've asked about it, and last time I asked about it, they didn't rule it out as a possibility.
This just goes back to a previous question. People were asking how they can help push this forward. And one thing that I think we're all doing is just going to everybody you work with, all the companies you work with, and just ask them, do you accept Bitcoin? Hey, I want to donate, but I can only pay in Bitcoins. You know, I want to buy your stuff, but I only want to pay in Bitcoins. And if they start getting that enough, that's gonna change their minds pretty quickly. Next question.
We'll take one more just for time purposes. We got to be out of here shortly. So,
Does the Bitcoin client work off of, like, right on top of HTTPS, or does it have its own protocol it uses on top of IP?
So the question was whether Bitcoin operates over, I guess, the HTTP, as in like the way when you open your browser, does it communicate the same way as your browser does with the internet, whatever that means? Bitcoin itself, the network is actually peer-to-peer. The protocol is new. Let me put it that way. It's not related to any of the existing ones like HTTP, FTP, all these weird acronyms you've heard it before. It has its own messaging system, and it has its own mechanism for nodes to find other nodes. And there is no the word decentralization comes in here. With HTTP, when you access a website, there is a computer somewhere that you are accessing. When you're talking about Bitcoin, you're talking about lots and lots of different nodes. They have their own little language that they speak with one another, and the system has a built-in way for those nodes to find one another, and they create this network where every node talks to 8 other nodes, and they send their little messages back and forth to say, I'd like to do these transfer these coins, and here's my digital signature to prove that I can do so. That's not to say that the protocol couldn't be adapted, or so to say, I guess, could be bridged with other technologies. You could have web servers. People communicate, I mean, they do already, through websites that use existing protocols, but they could use that to facilitate their transfers. But at its core, Bitcoin does not use any of those existing protocols.
anybody else? Answers, not questions. All right. Think that does it? Well. Well, this was awesome. Let's. This is just gonna be like one big continuous round of applause. Let's give it up for Alan Reiner, Zach Harvey, Tony Gallippi, Mark Lamb. I have to touch all of them. Josh Harvey and Matt Whitlock.